And explain to us what a fly team is. FLY, right?
Yep. So basically, it was like the flyaway team initially, but the initial concept of it was when something explodes overseas, terrorism event, you jump on an airplane and go and manage that and push for the investigation and everything. But what we found was if you do that, you're way behind the curve. You're not there for a day or so. So that didn't work. What it evolved into was us being pre-positioned in places that were basically, so there wasn't a lot of U.S. presence, but we needed to be there because stuff was blowing up that was impacting the U.S. And our job was to make connections with the local intelligence and law enforcement so that we were in with them.
I've asked you this before, if you knew Dale Watson. He was the executive deputy director of counterterrorism back at that. And
Yeah.
I think Dale retired in 2002.
Yeah, it was a name that I know I'm familiar with. I know I've seen it on stuff, but I definitely didn't know him.
He's in my book, he's a stud. He was on episode 173 here on Game of Crimes back in December of last year, on December 2nd. But he was the lead of CT, counterterrorism, when 9/11 happened. And poor guy, he still carries that weight. I mean, he's still carrying that burden.
That would be a lot.
He's one of the sharpest men I've ever met. I mean, we worked together we did a Booz Allen contract together. Actually, it was with SEAL Team 6. We were going down to Dam Neck, Virginia, teaching a 3-day course, but it wasn't anything tactical. It's classified, but mostly just about embassy life and how everybody hates you. To be quite honest with you.
Pretty true.
Wow. So so 2 years in Pakistan, and then what happened after that?
So, good question. I'll try to remember.
So you're still in the flyaway teams, I think, right?
Yeah. So still in the fly team, and came back from Pakistan. I know for a little while while I was back in the States, I was on a joint interagency task force tracking terrorists around the world and kind of tracking them down, I guess would be the way to say that. So I did that for a little bit, but then I went to Nigeria next as kind of my next long-term post. And so did a few 3-month stints through Nigeria and got to be all over that place. Again, it was right at kind of the beginning of Boko Haram, which is a big terrorist group in that region. And the U.S. government hadn't designated them as a terrorist organization. So my job was to go over and collect evidence and intelligence to try to figure out, are they something that we should designate as something that we should care about and spend our resources on? So that was kind of cool that I think my work directly led to them being designated as a terrorist organization. And then unfortunately they still exist, but that's the problem with the Nigerian government rather than ours.
Yeah. What you just mentioned there, you're being very humble about it, I guess would be a nice way to say it. I think that was something I would be very proud of, that you helped collect the information that, yes, they are, and they're legit. They're legitimately terrorists.
And that was the thing is, are they basically just bad guys doing bad stuff in northern Nigeria that we don't have to worry about? Or is there a terrorism element to it that would cause the U.S. problems? And so one of the things that I had to do was to show that they are connected to other groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb or Al-Shabaab or those. And to make those connections was the only way I could do that was to get up there where they were doing the attacks to collect evidence from the attacks that would help make those linkages. So that was another kind of exciting set of adventures running around northern Nigeria in the middle of basically a war zone.
Dude, they ever send you in for psychological counseling? I mean, you're going in some dangerous places. I thought the fly teams, and I'd heard Dale talk about this when we were doing our classified briefings to the development group down in the SEALs, but I was under the impression that you guys were based in the U.S. and then when an event would happen, he's calling you guys and they're putting you on jets and you're flying away to go take care of whatever the issue was. But it was more in a TDY type atmosphere, not a PCS, a permanent change of station.
Yeah, so it was TDY. I mean, I was like TDY to Pakistan for 2 years, so it's kind of a long TDY. Nigeria was a little bit more manageable, but so the original concept was, fly away and respond to something, but that just didn't work. So I had to change the model. And that actually had to do with a lot of the guys who are on the team before me. A lot of them still on the team with me when I got on it, but they had recognized that and they'd done a brilliant job of basically lobbying, saying, hey, we provide more value if we're in Kenya than if we're sitting in DC, right? If we're in Kenya, we're actually doing stuff that benefits U.S. government. If I'm in DC, I'm just learning about Kenya, but I'm not there, right? And that idea paid off so many times. Like one example was there's the World Cup bombing in Kenya and Chad. Don't remember what year that was, but we had guys there who set up evidence lockers and everything. So when something like that did happen, the locals had the materials and the knowledge and the ability to properly collect the evidence and to properly maintain a chain of custody and everything, which without the flight team guys doing that, they wouldn't have had that ability, right? And I was doing the same type of thing in Nigeria, where when a bomb would go off in Nigeria, the Nigerian government response was get the fire department there and clean it up so it doesn't look like anything happened. Destroy all the evidence as quick as you can. Which legitimately that's what they were doing. So the Nigerian bomb techs were like, help us be able to get there and get stuff and get it in a way that you can take it and send it to TDAC, the Terrorist Explosive Device Analysis Center, and have them look at it. And so they were awesome at wanting to do that. And so setting up that capability, so when something did happen, we could immediately, if I couldn't get there, they could get there and collect the evidence.
Wow. It's, you know what? It's forward thinking. Which is what we need to do. Rather than being reactive all the time, you can be somewhat proactive.
Right. So you're not going to stop everything, but at least you can set yourself up better for when something does happen.
After Nigeria, did you come back to the U.S.?
Yes, I was on the flight team for maybe another year after that and did a bunch of shorter term things through Africa and Yemen. And Yemen was cool because it was right at the beginning of the war. So you'd look out from where we were working with the Yemenis and see stuff on fire and everything. That was kind of cool. But
most people are looking at me and you like, you two are stupid. You two are crazy. Most people get away from stuff like that. We look at it as, wow, this is exciting.
This is awesome. Where else would I want to be?
Right. Right there at ground zero when things are happening.
I did that, kind of bouncing around for another year. And then I got asked to come over to the High-Value Detainee Interrogation Group, the HIG for short. Mm-hmm. I'd actually, in 2009, the HIG was formed to figure out how do we better talk to terrorists and get useful information from them, and then to lead those interrogations. But 2009, a guy named Faisal Shahzad, he tried to blow up Times Square and almost did. He had an entire car bomb that he'd made. He just didn't quite, I think his fuse was a little bit off and his secondary explosive wasn't quite what it should have been. So basically it smoked a lot. The primary ones went off, but then they caused the secondary to smoke. So we got lucky, but he gets arrested ultimately. Somehow he evades surveillance and is able to get on an airplane before we arrest him, but I wasn't part of that. But he gets arrested. President Obama says, this new group that I just formed, the HIG, I want them leading this. And who wants to tell the president? Well, yeah, we've started, but we don't have any interrogators or really anybody on the HIG yet. So rather than tell him that, they just said, Colton, flight team guy, you're now the HIG interrogator. Go to New York and lead this thing.
Here, you take it.
You take it, go, which is pretty much what it was. And there were a couple brilliant analysts with me on it. But me and another flight team guy go up there to lead this thing. And I'm sure you've interacted with New York Field Office or with the VA equivalent. Yeah. And so New York mentality, we own the world and you guys work for us, not the other way around.
Yep.
And so arriving in New York was unpleasant, to say the least, because they wanted nothing to do with us there. But finally talked my way in and smoothed things over and got to run that thing for days. But so that was my introduction to the HIG, and I kind of stayed in touch with them through the years as they were doing their stuff. But in 2014-ish, they said, hey, will you come over? And so there's the academic side to me. And they're like, will you come over and take all this research that we've done and make sense of it for us? How do we actually use this to talk to people? Mm-hmm. And then how do we train it to other people? So I got brought over still as an interrogation team leader, but also as the guy who's going to take all this research and figure out what it means about talking to guys who really don't want to talk to us. So that became my next job.
Well, that HIG thing, now that's not just straight out Bureau, that's intel community, right?
Yep. It's a joint effort between FBI, CIA, and DOD.
I can't imagine the snub that you got when you got there.
Yeah, it was to create a new organization from 3 different organizations that don't always get along very well, and then say, now you're going to work nicely together. Yeah, that didn't work very well at all, but
which is a shame.
Still doesn't. but we
You know,
tried.
Yeah, and before you go into your next phase, I think I saw this on LinkedIn where you were the lead on a terrorism investigation at Fort Hood, and as well as the Boston bombing. Is that right?
So one of the leads. I won't claim to be the lead on them, but with Fort Hood, that was actually kind of funny because that was Times Square bombing might have been 2010, but Fort Hood was 2009, and I was in flight team training. So you get to the flight team and you go through 6 months of pretty intensive training. I got hypothermia twice during it.
Wow.
So heat exhaustion another time and broke some ribs and stuff. So it was fun. It was difficult training. Kind of fun.
A little challenging.
Yeah, a little challenging. And I'm sure every flight team group that came in was equally motivated, but my team was definitely motivated. So we'd just push each other harder and harder. How extreme can we get in this? Which led to almost dying a few times probably, but it was worth it. But I could go anywhere in the world now and I'll be fine.
Yep.
It's not going to be that bad. But I'm in flight team training, and we're actually doing something in Northern Virginia at Quantico. So I was driving back to my house from Quantico, and I get a phone call, and as the unit chief for the flight team, he's, Seale, where are you? I'm driving to my house. He's, all right, you got a bag with you? Yeah. He's, all right, go to Manassas Airport. There's a plane there. Y'all are going to get on it, and you're going to fly to Fort Hood. There's just been a shooting there. And so I'm like, all right. So I actually had to swing by the office and get a bunch of crime scene stuff and grab it and throw it in my car and get to the airport. Get to Fort Hood, and I don't remember. It was like 14 people got killed there, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Yeah, but get there, and they've removed the bodies, but there's still just pools of blood everywhere. But no knock on CID, but they were Army Criminal Investigative Group. They were trying to process the crime scene, and they were going to just ruin most of the evidence with what they were doing. So I had to come in and call timeout, stop touching anything. Let's secure the scene, do this systematically and correctly, and rather than just running around picking up shell casings wherever they are.
Which makes you very popular amongst everybody when you do that.
Yeah. Again, I'm really not trying to be the headquarters guy taking over stuff, but we do have to do this right. So my job there initially was to secure the scene, protect it, knowing that then we'd have a full bureau response with our evidence response team so that we could do everything right systematically. And so I did that. And once the ERT, evidence response team, shows up, I go, okay, you guys got this. Let's see what else needs to be done. And I go into their command post, and they've got all this intel coming in, and it's just piling up in a box. Nobody's doing anything with it. And they did a search warrant on, oh God, just spacing out the guy's name who did it.
I'm with you. I don't remember either.
That's embarrassing. But we did a search warrant. I'll figure it out in a minute. We did a search warrant on his house, and then they put all this stuff in a supply closet, and it's just sitting there. So we have all this stuff that we should be following up on. So then I just took that over basically and said, okay, here's my new job, is to get people out following up on all these leads that are piling up in this box and analyze what did we get from his house and what do we need to follow up on that. At the time something like that happens, Major Nidal Hassan.
There you go.
I knew it would come if I stopped thinking about it. Right? But we didn't know if Hassan had done this alone or if there are other people involved. Like nearly every mass shooting like that, the initial reports are there are 2 gunmen. It usually comes down to there's one and people are just hearing echoes or just mishearing. But we still didn't know. And you don't know if somebody else helped him plan it or the like. So got to follow up on all the leads and be sure. Or if there is somebody else, find them. So that became my role for a few days running that. And we had another couple guys on the flight team there to interview Hassan. Unfortunately, he was in a coma the entire time because he'd been shot in the thing. So
did he eventually die or did he go to prison?
No, he's still in prison. I can't remember if they sentenced him to death or not, but he's still alive. I know that. He's in a wheelchair, I think.
And then what was your role in the Boston bombing? We had Ed Davis on here a few years ago talking about the Boston bombing.
Yeah. So it was actually kind of similar. And Absolutely. Again, no knock on the Boston Field Division, but it was just like Fort Hood. Something happens in your backyard, you are certain that you have it under control, but you don't see all the things you're missing, basically. And Boston bombing happens. The unit chief of the fly team, he's trying to say, we need to go, this is what we do. And headquarters in Boston are saying, no, Boston has it under control. And finally, our unit chief just says, we're going to Boston. And we get in our cars and we actually drive lights and sirens from DC to Boston, which was
There you go.
as fast as we could, which was pretty fun.
Yep.
Except terrifying when you're driving on the shoulder of a highway and all of a sudden, like, the Jersey wall like moves over 2 feet. So then you somehow
let me back
that.
in.
Yeah. But so we go up to Boston and I think we get there right about the time the older brother was killed and still looking for the younger one, and find out he's in the boat. And we get over to the boat and we get there and the hostage negotiation unit is there, and they're actually doing a fantastic job getting him to communicate and talk. But the boat is surrounded by probably 100 law enforcement guys from every agency you can think of. And we're all in a circle, guys, with guns pointed across the circle. This seems like a really bad plan. So I found an area next to this house that the boat was in. I'm just going to stay out of the way of as much gunfire as I can. Something goes bad. And sure enough, I think it was a guy from the Massachusetts Transportation Police or something. Don't know why, but pretty sure gets an itchy finger and fires off a round. And then hundreds of rounds are going off. God,
it's like dominoes.
Yeah, exactly. One guy goes, and then pretty soon it's just full on firing. Whatever the kid's name was who's in the boat gets shot through the jaw.
Tsarnaev?
Yeah, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, thanks. So Dzhokhar gets shot through the jaw. We get him out of the boat. A couple of flight team guys actually get some tourniquets on him and get him to the hospital. Then my role there becomes, again, secure the crime scene and find out what he has written inside the boat, because there were some reports that there's writing inside the boat, and he'd, in his blood, basically written his manifesto. It's kind of a brief manifesto, but it was secure the crime scene, and that was actually really embarrassing. At some point, the sun starts to come up the next morning, and neighbors are coming over carrying rounds in their hands, saying, "Hey, I found this in my bathroom. Do you want it?" And I am so happy we did not kill anybody in that process.
It's just by the grace of God they survived.
Yeah.
Wow. Holy cow. Now, and I forget what year that was. That
would have been 2012, I think. Somewhere
that's what I
around
was
there.
thinking. So then you go to the Hig in 14, is that correct? So did you stay in the Hig until you retired?
Yeah, I ended up doing so. I was thinking I'd go do one last kind of exciting thing in the Bureau, but I got to the Hig and found I absolutely loved it, and I was getting to still travel all over the world and do fun stuff. And at that point, just fell in love with the research, and kind of that academic part of me came back, and I was, this is cool. We're leading kind of the world right now and figuring out how do we most effectively talk to people, and how do we not break things in the process, basically. That just became really fun, and developed some interview specialties while I was on the Higgs. So I still got to go out and do those. One of those was, right, the FBI sends informants all over the world to collect stuff for us, but it's not always clear when they come back if they're telling the truth, or are they just manufacturing stuff because it's what we want to hear. And so there was that, and then there were handling problems. Agents not being able to really handle their source very well, and the source is kind of going out of bounds more than they should be. And my job was to go sit down with the sources and talk to them for 2, sometimes 3 days, and to figure out, is what they're telling us true, one. And that was where the Hig had done a lot of research, is how do we accurately detect deception? Because most of the stuff we've been taught is just unfortunately wrong. Like all the stuff I relied on throughout my whole career, and realized,
oh, geez.
And you're like, why am I so bad at detecting deception? Oh, because everything I've been taught is wrong. That's why. But we did figure out a methodology that is about 80 to 90% effective in discerning truth from not truth. I'd go out and I'd use that talking to them, but then also just that having somebody else talking to the source, you're able to figure out and kind of resolve a lot of the handling problems as well. That actually became really fun because, FBI sources are interesting, weird, unique people. And so getting to spend 2-3 days talking to them this is fun. You just get to learn cool stuff about weird people who are able to go to dangerous places for us. And I really liked that part of the job, but then also still interviewing terrorists and around different places.
Now you retired from the Bureau in 2020, is that right?
Yep.
Why'd you decide to retire?
It was June or July 2020, pandemic's going on, and we weren't able to deploy anymore on the HIG, and they were trying to figure out, well, can we interview terrorists by Zoom or something? And I'm just, wow, that doesn't sound any fun to me. And then I developed this whole training program for the HIG, and we've been doing that all around the world with all of our trusted partners. I got to work closely with all the Five Eyes to completely change their intelligence programs, and I was absolutely loving it. And then pandemic comes, and I'd already sort of started to think, okay, maybe within a year or so I'll need to retire just so I can go do something new. But pandemic hit, and we need you to design a bunch of online training for us. And I was like, I'm eligible to retire. and we'd been looking for places to live, and we found this 75 acres in New Hampshire. And we're buying that. I'm retiring. We're moving to New Hampshire.
Wow. That's now you didn't. So when you retired, you didn't really retire, though, did you?
I haven't been very good at retiring, to be honest.
Me either. So did you go to New England College first, or did you start your own private company first?
I think I started my own company before I retired. I actually had to have a tumor removed from my spine, and then part of my spine fused back together and everything. But so for a couple of weeks, I was, I can't move, and they'd cut a whole bunch of nerves, and I'm also in extraordinary pain, but I didn't want to do any drugs, just deal with it. But while I was dealing with it, I created the company that ultimately, so I had that in place when I retired anyway. And then it's funny, there's this guy in the Bureau who I honestly, I thought he didn't like me. I didn't have anything against him, but I was pretty certain that he didn't like me. And I was okay, whatever. But then he comes up to me one day and he's, hey, I just did this presentation for New England College, and if you're moving to New Hampshire, you should go talk to these guys. And he sets me up with them. Okay, I guess you like me better than I thought anyway. Thanks. Ended up, you mentioned Frank at the beginning, ended up talking to Frank Jones, and they're like, yeah, come over here and teach some classes.
Wow.
I've been doing that on and off. Actually, this semester is the first semester I've taught there in a year and a half, I think, because I've just been way too busy. But teaching forensic psychology this semester, which I absolutely love teaching. Today was serial killer day, so they got to hear all about serial killers and all the
cool.
Nice details.
That's getting in the brain of the psychos that are out there.
Yeah.
I was reading an article, I think the Keene Sentinel. Do you realize?
Oh, yeah.
And they refer to you as a living lie detector.
Yeah, that's how they referred to me. I swear to God, I did not say that anywhere in the discussion I had with them. But apparently that made the good headline.
Yeah, it got my attention. So do you feel like that you can, on a short-term basis, without sitting down in a controlled environment and talking to somebody one-on-one for an extended period of time, can you tell if somebody's lying?
If they are talking, I can, because the way that we do it is through how they describe an event.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's really weird because we spend all the time looking for indicators of deception. Turns out, on the whole, universal indicators of deception really don't exist, but universal indicators of truthfulness do exist.
Really?
So I can tell really quickly if a story is true, but if those indicators are missing, then I've got to kind of push them a little further to figure out, okay, if those don't show up after talking to them about it further, then they probably are lying. But with just body language and that kind of stuff, I'd say I'm probably average is about 50%. And I'm probably, if that's all I'm looking at, I'm probably right about there.
Yeah. All right. So you see me doing my presentation for the students that come down from New England College there in Woodbridge. Was I lying or was I telling the truth?
There you were telling the truth.
Thank you, sir. I'll send you a check. Now, your company is called Pyxis Academy?
Pyxis Academy.
How'd you pick that name, Pyxis?
So Pyxis is a constellation. It's a southern hemisphere constellation, but is a navigational constellation. It's used by ship navigators to navigate their way around the world before we had GPS and everything. And I just like that metaphor because when I'm training you, my goal is never to tell you how you should do something or what it should look like for you. It's to say, here's the science, here's the best practices, here's all this. Now, kind of like a compass, now you figure out where you want to go. So I'm just helping you go in the direction. You're figuring out the end point you want to be. So a compass helps you get there, but it doesn't tell you what that end point should look like for you. Because my specialty, right, was interrogation kind of stuff. And that's going to look different for everybody because you bring your personality into it. You bring yourself into it. My applying the science is going to look different than you applying the science. And it should, because that you bringing yourself into it is so important. So that's why I kind of like the compass metaphor with it.
Makes perfect sense. With your company now, I read through your website, see what you're doing, global intelligence consultant, speaker, trainer. Looks like you do a lot of corporate things. What would corporate hire you to do?
With the corporate side of it, it's kind of twofold. One is just so say you're a big company with stores all around the country and you have a large loss prevention department, and it's actually really training their loss prevention people on how to conduct interviews, but also how to conduct investigations and strong investigations. And so there's organized retail theft, which has become a huge problem.
Yeah.
And it's how do you move beyond just catching the kid who's been hired to go in and steal stuff out of your store? How do you build that case to go to a higher and higher level to deal with the organized aspect of it? So that's the interview part, and part of it is the investigative. But then the interviewing stuff is, as I developed that and put all the research together, I realized it's just how do you talk to other people? And I've been moving more into that. And you're manager of a large corporation. How do you talk to your managers? How do they talk to the people below them? And how do you effectively communicate to kind of unclog the information that should be coming up to you? If you're a CEO, you get about 20% at best of available information in your company. And you have no way to know that that is the information that you need to be able to make the decisions you have to make. So how do you change that dynamic and that culture to allow people to feel safe in moving that information up and not hoarding it for themselves? That's kind of the second part. And then I've become, over the last 2 years, really involved in intelligence analysis as well. And how do we make sense of situations? So what I was primarily working on was the Israel-Hamas stuff. And right, so there's a lot of uncertainty within that situation. And if we do one thing to try to fix it, what is that going to break, or how's that going to make something worse or better, and all of that. So I was asked, somewhat to my surprise, but I can't say who or for whom, but to come in and lead that effort in terms of helping some of the people who are in the middle be able to do that job a lot better. I spent about a year and a half working with them, a lot of overseas stuff, working with them on that, and see if we could get to a better outcome than where things stood. That was fascinating and just so much fun.
Wow. And that's very modern day too. That's going on right now.
Yeah.
You have built up a reputation for yourself through success and through being willing to try new things and go on these crazy adventures. I'm not sure I would go on, but
I think you would. I would disagree with that probably, but
maybe. I mean, you always want to do something new. That's the thing. There's always an opportunity to learn more, and I love that part of it. I think it's one of the reasons I like having guests here on the show is because I don't know all the stuff that you guys do, and you and I have known each other now for several years, and
yeah,
I never knew all this stuff about you. I know that you used to speak to the students, but I don't think I was ever in town the nights that you were talking.
Yeah, I actually missed doing that. That was fun because it was my adventures in terrorism talk that I would do, which is just say, hey guys, you could do this as well. Stay on the right path and do your stuff well, and find yourself in the middle of Pakistan wondering, wow,
how did I get here?
Get here. Cool.
One thing I just thought of, I forgot to ask you, did you do any work down in Guantanamo Bay?
I didn't actually. It was funny. I was scheduled to go down there when I was still up in Anchorage. Actually, I was supposed to do a rotation through there, but I was doing undercover work at the same time, and so that undercover thing took priority. Went and did that rather. then go to Guantanamo, which.
So you worked undercover too?
Yep. Yeah.
What kind of case was that? Can you say?
I did a couple different kinds of things. One was, it was back at the time where there was a lot of extreme left terrorism in the United States. We kind of go back and forth as a country. Well, it's extreme right, then extreme left, then extreme right again, and so forth. But then it was more of the Environmental Liberation Front and Animal Liberation Front. And they were blowing up labs and stuff and burning down Humvee dealerships and a whole bunch of other things. I got to go live with a bunch of them out in the woods for a while. We were actually looking for our primary thing. We were looking for a guy, Daniel Andreas San Diego, who actually just got arrested sometime within the last few months. But
Wow.
he was our primary target, so it took 20 years to get there, but we finally got there. But identified a bunch of other people along the way. So I did that, and then I was doing undercover with Albanian organized crime, they were doing drug and human trafficking and stuff.
Oh, pleasant people.
Yeah, I hated that. They are so unpleasant, and and they shoot each other all the time too. So I really don't want to be. You shoot each other, you're going to shoot me. And the intelligence factor wasn't very high either. So you literally had to pretend you were. I had to make a character that was more intelligent, just because I couldn't be that dumb all the time.
Couldn't get down to their level.
They were a challenge.
Did you, by any chance, ever know Dana Ridenauer?
I did.
She was working UC on those animal people out in California also.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. Now, there's another undercover who came up and did a really cool role for me on the human traffic. Or it was a police officer in the Anchorage Police Department who was picking up prostitutes and raping them. But finally got him convicted. But it took a while. But yeah. So I was thinking it was Dana, but it wasn't. But I did know her. I might have actually gone through undercover school with her because I definitely knew her.
Yeah, I love talking to her. She's a little spitfire. She was episode 156 here. We had her on in August last year.
Cool.
24. Yeah, and I think her husband was doing some UC stuff as well, and they ended up doing a partnership where they went over to Amsterdam, I think it was.
Oh,
and
cool.
And it was all to do with the animal, the people that were, I guess, the extremists when it comes to animals and trying to protect them and blowing up things and all that as well.
Yep.
So
I bet I went through we did an advanced course on that stuff, and I bet I went through that course with her, and that's why I know her.
Yeah. There was, you were recognized for a lot of your work, and you got certain awards throughout your career. I mean, I think the biggest one I saw, you got the FBI Director's Award.
Yep.
That's, which case was that?
That was actually for the work that I did at the Hig.
Okay.
So.
And then the National Intelligence Community Citation.
Yeah, that was for interviewing an ISIS computer hacker guy.
Wow.
He was fascinating. He's doing this stuff for ISIS, and he was kind of like, yeah, I support ISIS. At the same time, he would also tell me about how much he loved doing crack. So I would be like, dude, you do understand that there's a contradiction here. You like ISIS and you love the crack, but they would kill you for that. And his response was, yeah, that's funny, isn't it? It is, yeah. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Of all your adventures, I asked a couple. I don't want to waste your time, but I mean, it's so interesting talking to you. What case would you say gave you the most personal satisfaction throughout your career? I mean, you worked some high-profile things.
And there was the Bin Laden stuff was fun, and I got to do some really cool stuff, and I think we made a huge difference on what my contributions leading up to it and after it and everything. So that was fulfilling. The Nigeria stuff was fantastic. I did collect a lot of unique intelligence on that, and it was a fun adventure. I think probably it was the one that I mentioned, the girl who got eaten up by she was dead, but whose body got eaten by the bear. And there were two homicide cases that I worked right about the same time. One was her, and we had a really good idea that the two brothers, Michael and Robert Lawson, had killed Bethany, but Anchorage Police didn't have enough stuff to build that case against them. They'd asked me to come in and help on it. These guys, they're running a business, and if they're killing somebody and probably sexually assaulting other people, they're probably doing other stuff bad as well. I started looking into their business and was able to build about $1 million fraud case against them. It was a legit fraud case.
Wow.
And that's how I came to talk to the brother Robert, who had just helped dispose the body, was arrested him. And it was really interesting. Sat him down, and I didn't mention Bethany. I just laid out the fraud case. Here's why you're under arrest. Here's what we've got. Read him his rights and said, now just tell me about your life. And he starts talking to me, and he's talking to me, and I'm listening. And it's between 30 and 45 minutes. He stops and says, I'll tell you where she is. And I was okay. That is exactly why we're here. So let's do that.
Yeah.
And he wanted to talk to an attorney first. And we had an attorney sitting out in the lobby ready to talk to him if that came up. And comes in, talks to the attorney. We come back in. And at this point, the detective from APD who was leading that investigation comes in with me. And I was actually doing that interview with a Secret Service agent, a really good friend of mine. We started off, and then the Secret Service guy stepped out and the APD guy stepped in. But then he told us exactly where they'd put her. And that was funny because we go to try to find her body, but it's the middle of winter in Alaska. And the snowpack was, it was probably 6 feet deep. I stepped off the snow machine, and literally was over my head in snow. I had to grab the edge of the snow machine and pull myself out. We didn't find her body that go around because there was way too much snow, but we found her in the spring when everything started melting.
Wow.
That one felt good.
Yeah, that's got to be satisfaction there.
Yeah. And there's another one. There's a woman named Mindy Schloss who she disappeared, and Anchorage police were kind of not moving forward on the case, really. And her family and everybody's, she didn't run off to Vegas with some guy. That's not her. She's a nurse. She's 52 years old. She has never missed a shift. There is something wrong here. And so a detective at APD came over and said, hey, we're not doing this right, and we need your help. So got involved in that. And at the time, I was a squad supervisor, so assigned another agent to lead that for us, or two other agents actually lead that for us. But ultimately, we were able to find her body, use some really unique methods that had never been used before, actually, to track her ATM card had been used and track from that ATM card to the house where the person went to. And it had been used at two ATMs. Both tracks led to the same house, and identify a suspect, actually ultimately convict him. What made that case special was that when I first started at the FBI, I was just helping out on surveillance on some case because I was brand new.
Mm-hmm.
But it was targeting the same guy, and he had murdered another woman, but it was prosecuted locally, and they hosed up a bunch of the evidence. He only got convicted of tampering with a corpse. So he was out of jail really soon. That made that one really important, that not only we were able to solve Indy's murder, but also then get him to confess to avoid the death penalty. He confessed to the first murder as well.
Very good. Wow.
Yeah.
Those are things to be proud of. You don't bring the victim back, but it alleviates the questions that the families have.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody says it brings closure. I don't know if that's a real thing or not, but
I don't think you ever really get closure on something like that, but
I wouldn't think so.
At least you get something.
Your questions are answered. And you already mentioned this to a certain degree, but any words of advice or words of wisdom to leave us with here? And I typically say for those that are interested in law enforcement or being a first responder or going to military.
What I would say is, like I said, right, I ended up there accidentally. I had no idea what I was getting into and whether I was even going to like it. And it turned out that I could not possibly want a different career than what I had, right? Because it was so amazing and so awesome. And that was because of all the people I got to work with around the world, just such cool people from the Seale team to the Anchorage police and everybody in between. Just fantastic to work with. And the work you do is important. So, there's been ups and downs in how people feel about law enforcement, but you're doing just great stuff, and it's just fun as well. It has meaning and everything. How you get there is probably not follow my path, but
don't join the rodeo.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was just be good at a lot of things. Be actually good at a lot of things, and that is what makes, I think, people who are really good at law enforcement bring these weird different skills to it. Right? And when I was at SAIC, I worked my butt off because I wanted to be the best analyst they had. That led me to being in the FBI. And so it's just figuring out how to be the best at whatever you're doing, I think.
If you had it all to do over again, would you do anything differently?
I'm sure there are things I do. It's hard because I didn't want to change what I did, but They're like the other day we were talking about BAU, and I did work a lot with them. And
Can you tell our listeners what that is, please?
sorry, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit,
Yeah.
and I brought them in on a lot of interviews that we did, and I worked closely with them. And I actually worked closely with them on the thing in Nome where all the people were missing. I worked with them, and if I'd had time, which I didn't, but I would have liked to do more stuff with BAU and be more involved in their research and what they were doing and their case analysis and their profiling stuff and everything, because that is all fascinating to me. But so yeah, that'd be awesome. But at the same time, I was so busy doing all the other stuff. When was I going to do more of that? And what would I have
Yep.
lost in the interim?
Right. I mean, probably the only law enforcement person that went into the Bin Laden compound, not just
Yeah,
FBI, but any law enforcement agency.
that is true. Yes.
Wow. This last trip, we had New England College was there in Northern Virginia just a few weeks ago. And you know how when we go out to the academy and back, Frank lets students come and sit next to me on the bus and they can ask me whatever they want to ask me. And there was 2 or 3 students I spoke to that are very interested in going into the behavior analysis unit, that they want to pursue that kind of career. Man, when I was young, I never even heard of that stuff.
Yeah. And I would say to them, get a degree in psychology, and you're still going to have to prove yourself in the bureau before they let you in BAU. I've got a bunch of friends there, and they're one of them in particular is the absolute best agent I've ever known. She's 5'5", probably agent, and who's been in firefights around the world. She was in Yemen when the embassy's being overrun on the roof, shooting back at them. But she's also has a PhD, and she's absolutely amazing. That's the kind of people they're looking for.
Yeah. Be ready for adventures. Yeah, and the cool thing about it is you get to travel the world. You get to do things that people either see in movies or dream of that they would like to do, but they just don't. You and I know why those reasons are, but I mean, and somebody else pays for all those adventures.
Exactly.
It truly is an adventure of a lifetime. So any last words you want to leave us with before we close out?
I can't imagine what we haven't covered.
I tell you what, man, I'm so glad we did this because I learned so much about you, and it's a shame that I never got to sit in on one of your presentations, or that you and I have just never had the opportunity to sit down and talk at length. What an exciting life you've lived. I mean, everything. The rodeo thing just shocks the hell out of me, to be quite honest with you. I don't think I would have ever expected that from you. But for those of you that you want to find out more about Colton here, you can find him on LinkedIn at Colton, Colton, Seale, Seal, or you can put in, I'm sorry, and I got it on there. I don't just, or you can look up Pyxis Academy. And Pyxis is Pyxis, and then his website for his business is pyxisacademy.com. Man, thank you for being so open and honest with us and telling us about the things that you've done in your life. It's been a real pleasure to have you on here, Colton.
It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. And for our regular listeners, come back next week for another special guest. You never know who you're going to see on here. I'm going to continue to bring studs and studettes and former criminals on here for as long as we keep this show going. And right now I have no plans to get rid of the show. But I know that you want to come back every week. And that's because this is the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, and that's the game of crimes. God bless everybody. See you next week. Colton, thank you so much, brother.
All right. Thanks, mate.